I've never made a YouTube video before, and I've never really intended to, but since watching the Battle of the Gullet last week, I've had so many thoughts bouncing in my head that I've decided to inflict them on the internet as a form of therapy. I think House of the Dragon made the Battle of the Gullet less tragic than it could have been. And no, I'm not just mad because they changed it from the book. I'm not someone who thinks that every adaptation has to follow source material beat for beat. In fact, some of my favorite things in House of the Dragon are changes from the book. For example, Viserys is a much better character. Alicent and Rhaenyra being childhood friends adds a lot for me personally. And somehow, they even made Aegon one of my favorite characters, which the version of me reading the book would never have believed. Changes like this all really worked for me, even if they didn't for others. But my problem with the Battle of the Gullet isn't that it's different. My problem with the Gullet is that by removing one story element, that being the involvement of Rhaenyra's younger sons, it flattens the motivations of Rhaenyra, Jace, and even Baela to a degree. There is a version of this battle that kept most of the show's changes while making the outcome feel even stronger. The frustrating part is that the show already had most of the pieces it needed, but chose not to act on them. So let me explain the book version, the show version, and a hybrid version I think would have made this episode great. At this point in the book, Rhaenyra isn't even at Dragonstone. When she flew to the Riverlands to join Daemon, she does not return to the island afterward. At Dragonstone are Jace, Baela, and the rest of the Black Council. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra's two younger sons, Aegon and Viserys, are being sent across the Narrow Sea to the east for safety. Geographically, everyone believes the journey should be secure. What they don't know is that the Greens have secretly allied with the Triarchy, and the fleet intercepts the boys' ship within the Gullet. Aegon's young dragon Stormcloud is just barely big enough to carry him back to Dragonstone, but Stormcloud does die from wounds shortly after. Viserys, having only an unhatched dragon egg, isn't lucky enough to escape, and he is still out there in the middle of the naval battle. This, in my opinion, is the real driving force that sends Jace to the Gullet. Yes, he is helping defend the Velaryon fleet, but more importantly, he's trying to save his little brother. Even though he is heir to the throne and would be putting himself in immediate danger, he goes anyway. The book never outright says Jace is trying to rescue Viserys here, but I honestly don't think it has to. Once Stormcloud returns without him, the implication feels pretty clear. Jace is joined by the Dragon Seeds, and the battle unfolds much as it does in the show, with Vermax eventually being brought down and Jace being shot. The book never explains why he was low enough to be shot down, but I always imagined it was in part because he was searching the fleets for Viserys while fighting. Whether that was George's intention or not, I think the explanation fits naturally. I find this motivation really compelling, but it's completely absent from the show's version of the battle. The show's version changes the setup in a few important ways. Most notably, Rhaenyra is still on Dragonstone, and there is no indication that her younger sons are anywhere near the Gullet. Season 2 did establish that they were leaving the Vale to be spirited away to safety, but by the time this battle happens, they are not mentioned as being part of the story. Instead, the conflict centers on Rhaenyra herself. When word of the attack reaches Dragonstone, she insists on flying out on Syrax, and Jace refuses her. He argues that if anything happens to her, then the war is lost, and this is not the first time he has had this argument with her. In an act of pure desperation to protect his mother, he orders the Queensguard to lock her in her chambers. It is an extraordinary decision, but I actually think his reasoning is understandable. Jace then leaves for the Gullet with Baela. One thing I want to give the show credit for is the inclusion of her in this battle. I think it helps it. I understand why the show can't have all of the dragon seats there. It's almost certainly a budget and practical reason, and if the choice is between having Baela be there or the dragon seeds, I much prefer Baela. Once they arrive at the battle, most of the broad strokes are the same. Jace fights, flies too low, and is even saved once by Baela before climbing back in the air. The biggest addition is Rhaena on Sheepstealer. Not realizing who's riding the dragon, Jace and Baela move to intercept it, and in the chaos, Jace is forced low enough for Vermax to be brought down. I don't have any problems with how Jace dies. My issue is why he's there in the first place. In both cases, yes, he is protecting the fleet, but in the book, his little brother is also missing somewhere in the chaos. In the show, he is there because he's trying to stop Rhaenyra from putting herself in danger. This might sound like a small change, but I think it has huge consequences for both characters. First of all, my initial problems with the show's version. My first point is, admittedly, very nitpicky and overall not very relevant, so I will keep it short. But Rhaenyra should not be at Dragonstone. Logically, she should have stayed in the Riverlands with Daemon following the Season 2 finale. While I can live with it, it is a bit clunky, and her being here should serve a good narrative purpose. My biggest issues are what the show is asking me to believe about Jace and Rhaenyra in this moment. Rhaenyra has put herself in danger on more than one occasion already. Even if her intentions have been noble, it doesn't change the fact that she has made dangerous calls for herself without, and sometimes in spite of, the opinions of her council and, more importantly, Jace. She infiltrated King's Landing in disguise to meet with Alicent without telling anyone. She wanted to go to Rook's Rest, which ultimately ended up being a trap. And just now, she has once again met with Alicent in secret and is willing to believe her, even though she and her council have no real reason to. She never seems to acknowledge the danger she has put herself in with these actions, and sees herself as completely justified. And now here she is again, ready to jump into danger for no other reason than seemingly, I'm the queen and a dragon rider, so I can do it. No matter what we, the audience, know, it is completely believable that Jace, the character, has reached the point where he thinks that someone has to stop her, even if that someone is him. Where the show loses me with Jace is that he then goes and does the very same thing he forbid his mother from doing, with no acknowledgement of the hypocrisy of this. In the same breath that he says it could be a trap and death is possible for Rhaenyra, he then tells Baela he believes they are ready and they can win for the queen. To me, it makes him seem like he's naive and making a mistake, instead of competent in the knowledge that it's dangerous, but he'd rather it be him than his mother. Another issue, and this might be more controversial of a take, is the impression the show gives off on why Rhaenyra is being kept from the battle by everyone around her. I've seen people argue, and it's reasonable to get this opinion based on how the story presents itself, that the only reason they want Rhaenyra out of the battle is because she's a woman, but I don't really think that's what's happening here. Obviously, misogyny exists in Westeros. The whole Green claim itself is built upon it, but wanting to keep the ruler away from battle isn't unique to Rhaenyra. Throughout Season 2, the Greens had to keep Aegon away from battle, and when he finally didn't listen to them and went to Rook's Rest anyway, he nearly died for it. Otto stopped Viserys from confronting Daemon about the stolen dragon egg in Season 1, claiming an issue of Viserys' safety. Hell, all the way back in Season 1 of Game of Thrones, Ned talks Robert Baratheon out of competing in the Hand's tourney because no one could risk hurting the king. Protecting the monarch, when at all possible, is just a logical strategy. I can follow the character's reasoning in the show version, but I do think it makes both Jace and Rhaenyra come off more as reckless, which, while a valid character choice, to me is not the strongest one. So how would I, merely a fan of this world, have combined the two versions to make a great Battle of the Gullet? Like the book, I'd put the younger boys back into focus. Since the show has aged them down, and Stormcloud obviously cannot carry Aegon to safety, I would simply have a raven from their ship be the one that reaches Dragonstone. The details aren't especially important. What matters is that everyone realizes the boys are trapped in the middle of the fight. This alone completely changes how one reads Rhaenyra's insistence on going to the Gullet. Suddenly, it's not about having a warrior fighting spirit in battle, but it's a mother who will go to any length to protect her children, even at risk of herself. I would still have Jace decide to lock her away, as he is just as desperate to protect her, and this is the only way he sees how. But now, he will also openly acknowledge the contradiction he has made. He can tell Baela some version of, I know I'm not allowing my mother to risk herself, while I'm about to do exactly that. The difference is he accepts his hypocrisy because he feels he cannot abandon his brothers. He isn't necessarily going because he thinks he's ready and thinks he can win. He's going because, to him, his brothers are worth the risk of dying for. Like I said, I love the inclusion of Baela and I still want her there. And there are multiple ways you can get her to join Jace. You could have her insist on going because remember, these are her younger half-brothers too through Daemon and she wants to protect them as well. Or, you could have Jace still ask her to come. But not because he's convinced they can win, but because he doesn't want to face this alone, because he knows how dangerous it is, because he knows he could die. He's afraid, and he trusts Baela and wants her beside him. I think this works because of how the relationship has been shown between them. They may not have had a huge amount of screen time, but every scene they've shared together has shown them as a united front. They clearly care deeply about one another, and it feels completely believable that, in a moment like this, Jace wants Baela at his side. While they are in the fight, I would keep most things as is, with the pair of them burning ships, Jace flying too low, but with the added knowledge they are trying to locate the boys. I would have Baela manage to get a hold of little Aegon, and Joffrey, as he is here via the show version, onto Moondancer. However, something has happened and she is unable to rescue little Viserys. Maybe they've been separated, or she has to dodge an attack before she can get a hold of him, etc. But either way, Jace tells her to fly the boys she has away while he continues to hunt for Viserys. Now, Baela has a difficult decision. Does she get the boys to safety, or stay behind to cover Jace? Either decision is understandable, and either decision leaves her with guilt afterward. I'll even keep the show's change of including Rhaena on a wild sheep stealer. And whether Sheep Stealer attacks Moondancer or Vermax, it doesn't really matter. The point is that Jace still goes down after dodging the wild dragon. While having the same outcome, in this version of events, both Jace and Rhaenyra come off as more sympathetic, nuanced, and ultimately tragic given the end. Overall, I think that including the younger boys at the Battle of the Gullet would make the core of the battle about family and love, and deciding to leave out this motivation strips interesting character beats. We could still have all of the action, with a more powerful heart at the center of it. I think, for example, the show does this well with the Corlys and Alan side of the battle. If the little boys had been kept in the narrative, Rhaenyra would have come across differently. Instead of wanting to join the battle simply because she wants the fight, she's trying to save her children. She's still making a very dangerous decision, but it's one the audience instinctively understands. It echoes moments we've already seen from her, like when she stepped between Alicent and Lucerys in Season 1. She's acting as a mother first, not as a commander. Jace benefits even more. Rather than, somewhat naively, charging into a battle he isn't ready for, he understands exactly what he's risking. He knows that he's asking Rhaenyra not to endanger herself while doing the exact same thing, but he accepts the contradiction because he can't live with losing another sibling. Given Luke's death, this feels completely believable to me. Remember, Jace is the one who initially suggested he and Luke be envoys in Season 1. His guilt of this has subtly brewed beneath his character and Harry Collette's performance multiple times in Season 2, and ultimately, it changes his death into feeling like a tragic sacrifice, rather than a tragic mistake. It also raises the stakes for the audience. We're even more invested in Jace's success, because he is acting as a hero here, and we can better empathize with his difficult decisions. In addition, every time we cut away from the dragons and back to the ship fighting, we are, of course, worried and invested in Corlys and Alan, but subconsciously, we're seeing the violence happening around them and hoping that the innocent children, who are also in the battle on a ship, are not being subjected to it. I can't help but wonder why the show decided to omit this motivation. As I'm writing this, episode 2 hasn't aired, so maybe some of the show's reasoning will become apparent in the next few weeks. But for me right now, I think that the show flattened the Gullet down to good, when it easily could have been heartbreakingly great. I'm not saying mine is the correct way to adapt the story, or even the best one. I'm just one fan who loves this world and these characters, and I couldn't stop thinking about how differently I wish this episode would have gone. So let me know what you think. Did the show's version of the Gullet work for you? Do you think Jace and Rhaenyra came off differently than I did? And if you could change one thing about this episode, what would it be? And if this somehow becomes my first and last YouTube video, thank you for spending a little time listening to one woman overanalyze a story she is extremely passionate about.